Americas. Trump raises tariffs on Canada by 10% over Reagan ad. President Donald Trump had halted trade talks with Canada over a provincial government's ad that has since been cancelled. President Donald Trump meets with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney in the Oval Office on October 7. Sarah L. Voisin / The Washington Post. By Megan Vasquez. President Donald Trump said in a social media post Saturday that he is raising tariffs on Canadian imports, citing the airing of a television ad in the United States that features President Ronald Reagan criticizing tariffs. Get concise answers to your questions. Try Ask the Post AI. Because of their serious misrepresentation of the facts and hostile act, Trump wrote on Truth Social, "I am increasing the tariff on Canada by 10% over and above what they are paying now." The pledge to slap additional fees on imports from Canada marks the latest escalation in trade tensions between the two countries, which had been in the midst of negotiations until Trump torpedoed talks Thursday. Trump said he was stopping talks with Canada over what he claimed was a fake advertisement. The ad excerpts audio from a 1987 radio address in which Reagan describes imposing tariffs as a nearsighted policy that will imperil U.S. jobs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars, Reagan says in the ad. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse. Businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Follow Trump's second term. Follow. While the advertisement splices and reorders portions of Reagan's comments, all the quotes appear in the original address. Trump continued to rail against Canada on Friday morning, charging without evidence that the country was trying to influence the U.S. Supreme Court, which will weigh in on the legality of many of his tariffs. A hearing is set for November 5 on whether Trump's duties imposed worldwide under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, are lawful. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, whose progressive Conservative government paid for the ad, said Friday that he had decided to pause the advertising campaign effective Monday after speaking with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. AI icon. However, the spot was still scheduled to air over the weekend, including during the first two games of the World Series between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Toronto Blue Jays. Though it's unclear what sway the ad would have on the U.S. justices, Trump again claimed on Saturday that the sole purpose of the ad was Canada's hope that the United States Supreme Court will come to their rescue on tariffs that they have used for years to hurt the United States. He also appeared to take offense to the ad continuing to air during Friday's game, claiming, "Their advertisement was to be taken down immediately, but they let it run last night during the World Series, knowing that it was a fraud." The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Carney said Friday that Canada could not control U.S. trade policy and would instead focus on diversifying its trading relationships. He said Canadian officials have held detailed and constructive trade discussions with U.S. officials and believed they had made progress. "We stand ready to pick up on that progress and build on that progress when the Americans are ready to have those discussions," he told reporters on a tarmac in Ottawa before leaving for Asia. Dominic LeBlanc, the Canadian minister in charge of U.S.-Canada trade, responded to Trump's latest bump in tariffs in a post on X, writing, "We will remain focused on achieving results that benefit workers and families in both the United States and Canada, and that progress is best achieved through direct engagement with the U.S. administration, which is the responsibility of the federal government." Both Carney and Trump are going to Malaysia for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, meeting and later to South Korea for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, forum, but Trump told reporters early Saturday aboard Air Force One that he doesn't intend to meet with the Canadian leader. Trump has upended historically close U.S.-Canada ties since returning to the White House, imposing new tariffs on Canadian goods and repeatedly threatening to make Canada the 51st U.S. state. AI icon. He has called off trade talks with Canada in several instances and sometimes gained concessions. In June, for example, he halted negotiations over a digital services tax. Canada rescinded the tax, and negotiations resumed. On Friday, Kevin Hassett, director of the National Economic Council, told reporters that Canadians have been very difficult to negotiate with and that Trump's frustration has built up over time. Canada sends more than 3/4 of its exports to the United States. AI icon. Trump has imposed several sets of levies on Canada, 35% tariffs on goods that don't comply with the U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement, plus additional levies on steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber. Tariffs at any level remain a tax on America first, then North American competitiveness as a whole, Candice Lang, President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, said after Trump's latest tariff announcement. "We hope this threat of escalation can be resolved through diplomatic channels." Amanda Coletta, Andrew Jong and Rachel Siegel contributed to this report, What Readers Are Saying. The comments overwhelmingly criticize President Trump's decision to raise tariffs on Canadian imports in response to a Canadian ad quoting Ronald Reagan. Many commenters describe Trump as thin-skinned, petty, and acting out of personal insecurity rather than sound policy.